This is americasdemocrats.org, the weekly netcast for stand-up Democrats. I'm your host, Jim Cuddy. Political scientist and Congress watcher Lee Drutman assesses the House Republicans under new Speaker Paul Ryan. Regular commentator Fred Rotondaro says the Republicans' biggest problem is they're looking for brutally simplistic answers to complicated issues. And Bill Press talks with USA Today's Susan Page on a new book about George H.W. Bush and his son. Are you tired of Tea Party Republicans and Rush Limbaugh dominating the airwaves? Do you want the facts you won't get on Fox or even on CNN? Then stay tuned. Our sponsor, 21st Century Democrats, works hard to get everyday Democrats involved in returning our party to its roots and to success at the ballot box. Sit back and listen, then stand up and fight. And follow 21st Century Democrats on Facebook for all the latest progressive news. We're glad you can join us. Political scientist Lee Drutman wonders how long it will take for Paul Ryan to come to the same conclusion as John Boehner, that the Freedom Caucus is made up of crazy people who he will not listen to. And we say hello to Lee Drutman, political scientist who researches political influence, a fellow at New America. He's also the author of the book, The Business of America is Lobbying, How Corporations Became Politicized and Politics Became Corporate. Lee Drutman, thank you so much for joining us today on americasdemocrats.org.
It's a pleasure to be with you.
Nice to speak with you as well. So there's a new sheriff in town in the House of Representatives, Paul Ryan, the new speaker. Are you hopeful that the House might return to some semblance of responsibility under Ryan?
Return? I'm not particularly hopeful. I think there are deep fissures within the Republican Party over strategy and approach, and I think it will be continue to be an unruly bunch. So I don't even I can't imagine what I guess I'd say I can't imagine how they would become responsible given the chaos within the Republican Party at this point. But they may figure out how to govern. I don't know how responsibly they'll do it, but they may figure out how to work out some compromises.
Well, I mean, that's his first problem is just getting his own party in line, and not to even talk about trying to work across the aisle.
Yeah, well, those seem to be two different choices, right? If he wants to keep the folks in the House Freedom Caucus happy, that means including them in the process and shutting out the Democrats. If he wants to keep his business friends happy, it probably means working with some Democrats to get stuff done, like reauthorizing the Ex-Im Bank and passing the highway bill and a few other things. So he has a choice to make what kind of speaker he's going to be. Is he going to be somebody who crosses the aisle to work with Democrats on some key priorities, or is he going to keep his base happy?
What motivation does the far-right Freedom Caucus have to legislate responsibly now that it's overthrown Boehner and Kevin McCarthy?
I don't know what you mean by legislate responsibly. Do you mean legislate at all?
Let's just say, legislate at all, because there's not a whole lot of that going on anyway.
Well, I think they feel like they've got some blood, and that they're going to keep fighting for what they believe in. I think they see themselves in a Manichaean struggle against big government, and that's a struggle that doesn't allow for much compromise. And I think they'll keep demanding bigger cuts and no compromise. The question is, at what point does Paul Ryan come to the same conclusion that John Boehner came to, which is these are a bunch of crazy people, and I'm not gonna listen to them. Certainly, Ryan made nice to them and going to talk to them and express some sympathy for their priorities and their views. We'll see how that how far that lasts when he has to make some choices about whether or not he's going to pass legislation or not.
Mm-hmm. Now, the Freedom Caucus claims it's only interested in restoring what's called regular order, abiding by longstanding House rules of procedure. Is that a good idea, or could it come back and backfire on them?
I think it's a good idea because I think it would actually cause the House to function better if stuff went through the normal committee and subcommittee process and was not done at the last minute by leadership. And I actually think it would backfire on them. Look, I think the thing to understand about the Freedom Caucus is that there's a lot of you might call it religious zealotry, and like many religious zealots, they believe that they've discovered the truth, and they've discovered something that if only other people have a chance to hear, that they will come around to their belief. Now, I happen to think that's wrong, but I'd like for that to be proven wrong in a majoritarian setting. Like the House should be a majoritarian institution. It hasn't operated in that way for a long time, but I think it ought to, and with including more open amendment process and more devolution of power to the committee and subcommittee, which are spaces where people can work across party lines to work stuff out, stuff that's not so much caught up in the intensely politicized leadership, which is just really trying to maintain control of the House for a particular party. So I think it would be worth trying. I think that's the moments in which Congress has functioned the best in American history have been moments when there was kind of a reasonable balance between power in leadership and power at the committees and subcommittees. So I think it is a good idea. I don't think it'll give them the results that they want, and also I don't think they really want an open process. I think they just kind of say that, but if you look closely at their demands, there's all kinds of caveats on that open process. It's kind of, we want an open process for us, but not for the Democrats.
Right. We're speaking with Lee Drutman, political scientist, fellow at New America, and author of the book, The Business of America is Lobbying: How Corporations Became Politicized and Politics Became Corporate. Do you find it somewhat ironic that the centralized power of the House leadership began under Newt Gingrich over 20 years ago when it was thought to benefit conservative ideology?
Well, it predates Gingrich. I mean, let's be honest. It goes back to and Jim Wright was the first person a Democratic speaker who really centralized power. I mean, certainly Gingrich took it a step further than Wright did. But I mean, Democrats were doing it for decades too, in part because large part because the Democratic Party saw that committee chairmanships were controlled by conservative Southern Democrats who are bottling up a lot of liberal priorities. So this has been, both parties have been doing this for a long time. I mean, certainly it is fair to blame the escalation of this on Gingrich, though. But I wouldn't say that it was him alone.
Not entirely his fault, anyway. The minority of Republicans have veto power over anything the House might consider because of their insistence that nothing be brought up that doesn't already have a majority of Republicans in favor of it. Does this not automatically stifle compromise and good policymaking?
Well, it certainly does. And what's happened is that Boehner has violated the so-called Hast rule, which, by the way, the Republicans really need to change at this point, or at least the name. I mean, I think they should get rid of it entirely, but if they're going to keep it, at least they need a better name for it. Yeah, I think it does, because it makes it hard to legislate from the middle. So I think this is the challenge that Boehner faced, and Bryan will continue to face, is that if you want to get stuff passed, you're going to need to do it with Democrats, because you have a bunch of Republicans who want very extreme policy, and until Republicans have 60 votes in the Senate and the White House, if you don't find compromise with the Democrats, you're not going to pass something that will withstand a presidential veto.
You know, in the old days, the House was run by strong committee chairs who were chosen on the basis of seniority. Many progressives, like today's conservatives, found that system stifling to democracy. But there were plenty of benefits from that, were there not?
Well, I guess the reason they didn't like that system was because you had a lot of Southern conservatives who were in one-party districts in the South when the Democrats used to control the South because the Republicans were the party of Lincoln. And so you had very, very conservative people holding these committees who were bottling up all kinds of progressive civil rights legislation. So at the time, for progressives, that made a lot of sense. Now, if you want to say that there were benefits to it, I think the benefits to some and Democrats maintain seniority in allowing committee chairs still, is that then you get people who are invested in the institution, have built up relationships over a long career, understand the process, and are not just there to basically use it as a fundraising tool for the party. So I think there's benefits to seniority. There can be some dangers to it if a certain wing of the party has overwhelming seniority because it's all in the safest seats.
It just seems like we're trying to find a way for Congress to get jump-started and start doing things again the way it used to work. It's not always going to be perfect and that kind of thing. So are these the types of things that need to happen to let the seniority thing go back to the system how it used to be? Or are we still trying to figure out how to get this thing to work again the right way for where we are in the 21st century?
Well, I don't think it's not necessarily about seniority or not. But it's about resources, right? Look, we have fewer committee staff now in Congress than we had in the 1980s by about a third. The committees don't have the resources they need to make policy. We now see more and more that leadership in both the House and especially the Senate is not even going through the committee process anymore. They're just bringing bills to the floor without letting that happen. So those bills become partisan bills, right? There's no space. Committees used to be places where the parties could get together and kind of deliberate and reach compromises. There's no space left for compromise when everything is controlled by the leadership, which is just trying to maintain or expand gain back the control of the chamber. So I do think that whether you can talk about whether you want it to be by seniority, whether you want it to be by a caucus vote, whether you want it to be by some mix, but I think it's the question is, do you want policymaking done at the committee level where people have the time to develop relationships and understand the policy, or do you want it to be just basically done by the leadership and in a largely purely partisan way? I think the first option seems better.
Okay. Lee Drutman, political scientist, a fellow at New America, and author of the book, The Business of America is Lobbying, How Corporations Became Politicized and Politics Became Corporate, joining us today on americasdemocrats.org. Lee, thank you so much for your time with us. We look forward to doing it again soon.
Pleasure to be with you.
Thank you very much. And this is americasdemocrats.org, the weekly netcast for Stand Up Democrats. We want you to sit back and listen, but we need you to stand up and fight. Do you want to get involved and help get our party back to its roots and to success at the ballot box? You can make your contribution to Democrats for America's Future and help us keep this show going and to elect Democrats who will stand up for democratic principles. Go to americasdemocrats.org and click on Donate at the top of the page. This is americasdemocrats.org, the weekly netcast for Stand Up Democrats. Commentator Fred Rotondaro says the popularity of Donald Trump and Ben Carson is due to their honesty, but that the GOP presidential candidates are looking for brutally simplistic answers. More on that in just a moment. Right now, we turn to Jim Hightower, America's #1 populist, for his common sense commentary.
Must everything be commercialized, even cancer? This is a question that more and more women who have breast cancer are asking in rising vexation over what's become known as the pinkification of their disease. They're referring to the ubiquitous breast cancer awareness campaign that uses pink ribbons and pink everything to promote mammograms for early detection of the cancer. Sounds innocent, except for a couple of ugly realities. Pink problem number 1 is that the campaign has become a cheap way for profiteering corporations to glom onto a feel-good cause, literally wrapping themselves in pink to sell their products under the guise that they are altruists, helping women fight this deadly illness. For example, during October's Breast Cancer Awareness Month, Delta Airlines dresses flight attendants in pink and sells pink lemonade on its flights. Ford sells pink Warrior decals for its cars, and Dick's Sporting Goods offers pink football cleats and other specially tinted merchandise. Pink problem number 2 is that the millions of dollars thrown into these corporate and charitable PR campaigns are focused on detection of the disease rather than on the more crucial needs of developing preventative measures and cures, caring for those who do get the cancer, and mounting an all-out research effort to determine its environmental causes. What do we have to show for the billions spent on pink ribbon products? Asked the director of the activist group Breast Cancer Action. A lot of us are done with awareness, she says. We want action. This is Jim Hightower saying we've had 25 years of what breast cancer activists now call pinkwashing, yet the disease is as rampant as ever. Wearing a pink ribbon is not enough. To help shift the effort into causes, cures, and caring, go to breastcancerdeadline2020.org. breastcancerdeadline2020.org.
Need an antidote to the progressive blues? Want some good news about how grassroots folks are rebelling against the corporate powers and winning? Well, here's an easy-to-swallow pill for you, the Hightower Lowdown. Hightower's monthly newsletter will give you the lowdown, even as it lifts you up. It's 4 pages a month, jam-packed with facts you can use, actions you can take, and Jim's own Texas humor, all for only $15 a year. To become a lowdowner, go to hightowerlowdown.org.
This is americasdemocrats.org, the weekly netcast for stand-up Democrats. Regular commentator Fred Rotondaro surveys the presidential field and says Bernie Sanders doesn't have a great shot and that Trump and Carson are taking advantage of their party's need for honesty. And we say hello to Fred Rotondaro, regular commentator for americasdemocrats.org and chair of Catholics in Alliance for the Common Good. Fred, thank you for joining us today on americasdemocrats.org. Always good to talk to you.
Jim, thank you.
Now, what do you make of the Bernie Sanders phenomenon? A way for progressives to vent before returning to Hillary, or a real shot at the White House?
If I'm betting, I don't think Bernie's got a big-time shot at the White House.
Mm-hmm.
There's simply too much going for Hillary, including endorsements, more major money down the line, support. But what Bernie is doing is incredibly important. And to me, Bernie Sanders is reminding the American public of what this country is about. He is saying to the American public, America is not for the 1%. It's not for the international corporations. It's for all of us. It's an opportunity for every living being in America to make it. And nobody else has done that in such a long period of time. Obama in 2008, in some of his speeches, got there, but when he was governing, he was willing to wheel and deal. He had to. He had no choice. Bernie is pushing Hillary, as we all know, to the left, and that's very, very important. I'm going to be out there. I'll be supporting Hillary. I'll be working for her. I'll give her money, but I get nervous, because she and Bill have a lot of support from Wall Street. And frankly, I think the biggest danger facing America today is Wall Street and international corporations. They are, in effect, taking democracy away from the American people with their money.
There are a lot of people that on Wall Street that should be in jail and should have been in jail for the last 7 or 8 years,
Jim, I think that is the biggest failure. I think that is the single biggest failure of the Obama administration. In 2012, American banks were fined about $100 billion. Nobody in any of those banks was indicted. They had broken laws. This wasn't for mistakes they made. This was for deliberate falsification of records, for taking homes away from people. Nobody was indicted. To me, that was ludicrous. One of the best things, I think, that the Obama administration, the Justice Department did was not too long ago when they took the man who was the chair of the Big Massey coal company, where 29 miners died in 2010, and they tried him for violating safety regulations, for deliberately, willfully ignoring safety regulations that the American government said resulted in the loss of 29 miners. 29 men died. To me, that's the way it should be handled. You find the company who pays for it, the stockholders.
Right. Yeah.
But you take the guy who made the decision and said, you made these decisions, we're trying you, you're going to go to jail if you're convicted. To me, that's the only thing that's going to stop what the big banks are doing.
Mm-hmm. Now, the Republican race, let's talk a little there. How do you explain the popularity of extremists like Donald Trump and Ben Carson?
To me, the big issue with these guys is they are coming across as being honest. They're coming across as being very anti-establishment. I think Republican voters are very dissatisfied with their party. And I think a lot of Republican voters, particularly the far right wing, just looks upon the establishment figures in their party as being of no real intellectual honesty. I do some social media, and I find that I get a lot of support and retweets, whatever you call it, when I go after, quote, the establishment, including the Republican establishment. And I find that Tea Party members seem to endorse what I'm saying. Donald Trump, Ben Carson, they are outsiders. Carly Fiorina's an outsider. But those two guys are the ultimate outsiders, and they're also doing something that my wife, Kathy, says, and I think this is very valid. Donald Trump, in particular, presents issues as, this is very easily solvable. This can be solved. I can take care of this. I'll get on the phone. I'll talk to Putin. It'll be done in 10 minutes. So many right-wing voters want to return to the old wonderful days that never were, as we both know, Jim, to the old wonderful days when America could just flex its muscles and solve any problem anywhere in the world. Those days never existed. Some people think they do exist. Trump and to a lesser degree Carson are symbolic of a return to those kind of days. And I think that's why they're doing so well.
But it's dreaming. It's not real.
No, exactly.
I mean,
exactly.
This is what's astounding to me is that here you have the two front runners in the Republican race for quite some time now have been these guys, and
right.
They're not dealing in reality. And then what happens on the international stage? Look, Putin's not the owner of a hotel or a tract of land that's going to be negotiated here. I mean, there's a lot more involved than just 10 minutes on the phone.
Exactly. But if you're that guy, you're a trucker. I do a lot of emails with a guy named Trucker Bob. Trucker Bob's a great guy. He's got a grandkid. He's running his own small business. He doesn't want any more regulations. He thinks Hillary's a communist. He wants simplicity. Don Trump gives him, I'm tough, I'm strong, I can negotiate a deal. He can make life real. He can make life real for people who are just barely surviving. They cling. They cling. Barack Obama said it a couple of years ago, and they hammered him for it. But the Republican Party has been doing very well for very many years by a simple strategy. They go after single-issue voters. They go after very religious people who want to ban abortion. They go after gun guys. And what they say to these people is, we're on your side. You're going to keep your guns. We're going to ban abortion, which they can, of course. It's a Supreme Court issue. And consequently, so many of these voters that ignore what the Republican Party, the right wing, is doing to the American economy. And what the Republican Party, or right wing, is doing to the American economy is turning it into a banana republic. I think it was about a month ago, Jim. We all know about the horrible difference between the 1% and the rest of Americans. But about a month ago, I think it was the Center for Responsive Politics, did a study and found that the 100 top CEOs in America had more money combined in their retirement accounts than 41%. That is 116 million other Americans. To me, that is an obscenity. The Pope condemns that. Will the American bishops condemn it? I hope so. Will the Democrats go after Republicans on this? Meanwhile, when you look at the Republican debates, you have, as you just very acutely pointed out, you have them dealing in a lack of reality. That you have them dealing in fantasy.
Do you think Republicans can regain their senses and nominate someone actually likely to win the presidency?
I don't think it's going to happen. I think somebody like Marco Rubio has a possibility. Ted Cruz is a very bright guy. I hate the thought of Ted Cruz being president, but he's a very bright guy. John Kasich would probably be obviously far too conservative for me, but would likely be a pretty good president in many ways.
He's the most liberal guy of all the people you just mentioned. He's the most liberal guy up there.
Yeah,
how about that?
And of course, he's and despite his qualifications, remember he was in Congress. He was chair of the House Budget Committee. He worked for Lehman Brothers, but he's been a very successful and very popular two-term governor of Ohio. And I don't know what his poll numbers are right now, but I think if I were to enter the race on the Republican side, my poll numbers might be a little bit higher than John.
Well, there's that.
Kasich. The poor guy's got nothing going for him, but he's eminently qualified. Mm-hmm. The Republican Party is looking for brutally simplistic answers. Many of them feel their country has been taken away from them. I'm a believer in the impact of history. During the period of slavery, slave owners literally looked upon and treated their slaves as subhuman. They weren't really human beings. If they're not really human beings, we don't have to treat them as human beings, do we? I think now you've got voter suppression going on with so many Republican states, and I think the rationale for that is Republican governors and state legislatures don't view minorities, the poor, as really American. They are not honestly American. They're not fully American. They're takers. They're the 47%. If they're the takers, why do we have to give them a vote? So I think you've got a lot of mythologizing about America, and I think that Trump and Ben Carson tap into those mythologies very, very effectively. Mm-hmm. If either one of them ever got into power, I think we would really have a disaster. But it's possible. They just keep racking up wins in the polls.
Yeah. We're speaking with Fred Rotondaro, regular commentator here on americasdemocrats.org, also chair of Catholics in Alliance for the Common Good. Fred, there's been a lot of national attention, of course, on relations between police and minorities. Is that a sleeper issue in the campaign?
I think it may be. I don't think it's ever going to come out very, very strongly, but I think some politicians are going to be tapping into it. I think Hillary Clinton will tap into it. I give Hillary, by the way, a lot of credit because she apparently is going to be tackling gun safety as an issue, and I think that's very, very important. It's also politically very astute on her part because Hillary is going to need to win in certain states where gun safety, where progressives do want a certain amount of gun safety. And I see a tipping point, by the way, this year in regard to gun safety. Hillary's picking it up. Martin O'Malley is talking about it. Candidate for governor in California is. Terrence McAuliffe, in Virginia has been pushing this. But I think ultimately that the issue of police-community relations will be there. It's going to be a sleeper. I don't think it's ever going to jump to the forefront. Mm-hmm. I think that the issues are going to revolve around, Republicans would love to have them revolve around Planned Parenthood and these kind of issues. They want to avoid the economic issues for a very good reason. Republican policies over the course of the last 30 or 35 years have been a disaster for the United States. One of the things that I sometimes marvel at is the number of economists who look at worker stagnation in pay, and they say, "Why is this?" I'm not an economist, Jim. I took my only economics course 50 years ago from Tom Sheehan up in Scranton, Pennsylvania. Good course. But I tell you, I think I learned one thing in that economics course, and that is you look where the power is. Stock market has gone from about 1,000 points, has gone from 1,000 to about 18,000 since 1980. CEO pay has gone up 300 or 400%. Worker pay has gone up about 11%, not per year, total, counting for inflation since 1980. Why? Because CEOs have the power to do what they want to do regarding workers. Public policies support them. Globalization gives them more power. Technology gives them more power. There's anti-union policies. There's anti-worker policies. And so consequently, that working man or woman is getting, to put it bluntly, really, really messed over in a horrible way. And yet these same working people continue to vote for Republicans because of issues like abortion, guns, and the fact that they think a lot of liberals just don't respect them enough.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's obviously going to be a very interesting campaign. I'm sure things are going to change a lot between now and the next time you and I speak, and I look forward to doing that sometime pretty soon, because it's we might even be talking about a completely new set of people. Who knows? Fred Rotondaro, regular commentator for AmericasDemocrats.org, chair of Catholics and Alliance for the Common Good. Fred, always great speaking with you. Thanks again for joining us today.
Jim, thank you so much. It's been fun.
All right, thank you. And this is AmericasDemocrats.org, the weekly netcast for stand-up Democrats. We want you to sit back and listen, but we need you to stand up and fight. Help get our party back to its roots and to success at the ballot box. Make your contribution to Democrats for America's Future to keep this show on the air and help elect stand-up Democrats. Go to AmericasDemocrats.org and click on Donate at the top of the page. This is AmericasDemocrats.org, the weekly netcast for stand-up Democrats. And now Bill Press talks with USA Today's Susan Page about President Bush 41 and President Bush 43.
Hello, Susan.
Bill, I have a big question for you.
Yes.
I got home last night, true story, big box on my doorstep from Vermont Teddy Bear Company. In it, a Christmas bear, no card. So I'm assuming it's from you.
Merry Christmas, Susan. And were there was there any Cowgirl Creamery cheese along with it too?
There was none. There was none. Just a bear in a Santa costume. I have no idea who it's from.
You know I love you, Susan. Enjoy my bear.
Right. Yeah. You were the first name that popped into my head. This must be from Bill Press.
Or it might have been from George H.W. Bush. He gave us all a big Christmas present. Or what do you think of this biography where he slams Dick Cheney and Donald Rumsfeld?
You know, it's I've just read this book.
Really? Oh,
I'm reviewing
it
for USA Today. They sent me the book with the understanding that I couldn't talk about it until the publication date, which is not until next week. But in the New York Times this morning is a story by Peter Baker about some elements of the book. So I'm going to talk about what Peter Baker wrote about, because I can't talk about what I've read yet with the embargo agreement I have with the publisher. But Peter Baker reports that George H.W. Bush, who was so careful never to raise any criticism of his son's presidency, really takes on Dick Cheney and Donald Rumsfeld in this very interesting new memoir. It's not exactly a memoir. It's by John Meacham, but he had extraordinary access.
Oh boy! Yeah. To him, to the president, to the former first lady, and also to the diaries. Their diaries, right?
That's right. Yeah. It's. You know, George H.W. Bush never wrote a memoir when he left the White House. He's the only modern president not to do so. He wrote a book about foreign policy challenges with Brent Scowcroft. And in a way, I think this book is the memoir he didn't write because of the extraordinary access that John Meacham got.
Well, we all know Peter, and Peter's a great reporter. And Peter points out here, too, the president, former, okay, it's hard to keep him straight, H.W. Bush admits that W gets some of the blame because he hired them, right? And his own rhetoric was a little over the top, he felt.
Yeah. We all assumed that George H.W. Bush had concerns about some of the directions of his son's presidency, right? His course in Iraq was so different from the course that George H.W. Bush took after the first Persian Gulf War. But he hasn't talked about it in a candid way before. This is really the first.
So if we are now paying so much attention to what Daddy Bush is saying about his son George's presidency, maybe Jeb should be listening too, do you think?
Well, Jeb just seems to have no end of trouble. And, you see his bus tour yesterday where he is trying to be more, I think, vulnerable and more candid about things. It's like reset number 54. Yeah. So it makes you wonder, even given the money and the name, whether there's a path ahead for Jeb Bush.
Do you think I was just going to say, do you think he can bounce back? I mean, he does make a point. We all know people who've been high in the polls and ended up dropping out, or low in the polls and ended up winning. But can Jeb Bush pull that off?
Yeah. You don't want to, never say never, because candidates do. Look at Bill Clinton, who came back after being impeached, for goodness sakes. I mean, came back politically to continue to be a force. But it takes it takes an extraordinary drive to do that. I think John McCain had it when he was down and out in 2008 during the Republican presidential bid. He came back from being in a position as bad as Jeb has now, but he'll have to prove himself to do it. So we don't want to never say never, but I think it's become an extraordinary uphill climb for Jeb Bush, who started out on top.
Well, I hate to give Donald Trump any credit at all, but yesterday I thought he did make a point when he said about Jeb Bush. He said, okay, I'm a lousy debater. I'm not such a good candidate. My campaign is falling apart. Trump says, why would you say all those things, right?
Those are things Donald Trump will never say.
That's right.
Donald Trump will never say those things. And Bill, I just would like to remark that it's just that this is the day that you begin quoting Donald Trump as your political lone star.
That's a day I would live to regret. Marco Rubio, coming up after the last debate, of course, where he did very well. Now the knives seem to be turned on him, on his finances. Is this a problem?
Yes, I think it is. I think it's a question he's got to address. And, no surprise, you don't get to be the presidential nominee in a field like this without being scrutinized. And he has so far not had the kind of really spotlight that some of the other candidates have had. And these are questions that have been around for a while, including some credit card records from when he was a legislative leader in Florida that haven't been released yet. Now, he said yesterday he was going to release them. That's what I think you have to do in this situation. You've got to, tell everything, explain it, and move on. Until you tell everything, you can't move on.
I have to say, he was state Republican chair, I think, Republican leader of Florida, and was using the party credit card for personal stuff. Yeah. I mean, I was state party chair, Democratic Party chair of California. I never considered doing that.
Wait, I thought that's how you bought your house.
Yeah,
not true?
That's what Carol wanted, but I said, no, I'm not going to do it. But it's stunning that you would use a party card for
personal expenses. Even if you then reimburse, he says, well, I paid. But obviously that's not appropriate, which I think he acknowledges now. But he attributes it more to naivete than to an effort to actually misuse money. So we'll see. He's going to have these questions. There's another debate in Milwaukee on Wednesday, on Tuesday. So we'll see how he addresses those questions then.
And is this going to be a kinder, gentler debate?
Well, of course, we hope not.
Exactly. No, that's right.
No, I think as you get closer to the voting, and we're now getting, after it seems like this campaign's gone on forever, but now you're really getting close to the time where voters get to weigh in. So I think, if anything, these debates just get tougher.
All right. Well, Susan, give your teddy bear a big hug. Okay.
I'm going to name it Bill.
Every time you hug that bear, think of me. And have a great weekend. We'll talk to you next week.
You too, Bill.
Thanks. Susan Page, usatoday.com. Also host of Capital Download on WUSA 9 here in Washington, D.C., Sunday mornings at 8:30.
That's all for americasdemocrats.org. Thank you to all who made today's show possible. Lee Drutman, Fred Rotondaro, and the entire Bill Press team. And thank you for listening. If you liked what you heard, please get involved in our efforts to keep this show going and to elect Democrats who are bringing the party back to its roots. Go to americasdemocrats.org and click on Donate at the top of the page. And be sure to find 21st Century Democrats on Facebook. For americasdemocrats.org, I'm your host, Jim Cuddy. We want you to sit back and listen, but we need you to stand up and fight. Join us, support the show, and help elect Democrats who will stand up for democratic principles with your contribution today. Go to americasdemocrats.org and click on Donate.